Hey Amy, how you doing today? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. How's your day been so far?
It's been good. Quiet, which is nice. I've been able to get a lot of work done.
Cool. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so let the viewers know who you are, what you do, and why you do it, Amy.
Sure. My name is Amy Rowan. I am known as the Suburban Sexologist, and I'm also the co-host of the Sensational Sex Podcast. I am a sex and intimacy coach. I'm a board certified clinical sexologist, and I do what I do because I want people to have more passion, pleasure, and connection in their lives.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So when you look back at like your journey, like what was it like for you when you were deciding what you wanted to do, and what was that moment when you decided this is actually what you want to do in terms of helping people with their intimacy in their lives?
The moment that I decided, well, I think like with everything, it's a bit of an evolution and a journey, but I do always say I feel like I was born to do this work because my dad is a retired OBGYN, my mom is a psychologist, and so I mean, back into childhood, my friends were asking me questions, about their bodies, about as we moved into being teenagers and college, about sex, things like that. Um, you know, Deciding to become a clinical sexologist, that came to me uh, about 3 years ago. I had been working, I had a side business selling intimacy toys. So I'd been doing that while I was staying at home with my children and doing all of these really fun parties. We called them parties. But my favorite part of doing all of those parties was teaching people about the G spot, teaching people how to have pleasurable anal experiences, things like that, just the jaw drops that I would get night after night. But at the end of each of those parties, I would have one or two women that would come to me and say, Amy, that was so fun. I learned so much, but this is what's really happening in my bedroom. And my husband and I haven't had sex in a year, or I've never experienced an orgasm. Can you help? And I knew that selling a product wasn't the the ultimate solution. And so that's what sent me to go back to school to become a clinical sexologist.
Now, like often, like when people decide to get into something to help people with something, they themselves have had difficulty with it in their life. Would you say you've had any difficulty in the area that you're now helping people with in your life?
You know, what's interesting to me, because I think people come into this either because they've had extreme difficulty that they've overcome or they're very comfortable with things. And growing up, I was so much more comfortable and I felt like I knew a lot more than most people did. That said, I didn't experience my first orgasm with a partner. I was having sex for 3 or 4 years and didn't have an orgasm, and I didn't even know it. Like I didn't even know what I wasn't experiencing until it actually happened. And then I was like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. And then I've been with my husband. We've been married for 20 years. We've been together for almost 24 years now. And so I've been grateful that we've kind of learned and grown together. But, as I experienced my first orgasm, as I experienced my first G-spot orgasm, as I learned all of these things on my own, and I was like, I want other people to know about this. I want other people to learn about this, and I feel like I'm in a unique, situation to be able to teach about it. And I think it's also, and again, I grew up very open, and so for people who didn't have the same upbringing that I did, where maybe they got negative messages about sex or about their bodies and things like that, then it's that much more challenging for them.
For sure, for sure, for sure. Now, like all of us, we've all had like different struggles in previous relationships that we navigate through to get to where we are now. What would you say some of your previous struggles have been in previous relationships or relationships in general? And how did you navigate through those to get to where you are now?
Sure. Um, I had several, like 3 or 4, longer term monogamous relationships before I got together with my husband. And, I think I was very young. So my husband and I got together when I was 23. So this was a long time ago. But I think what I learned in those previous relationships, especially, was that when I was with somebody that was bringing out a bad version of myself, like would make me feel crazy or even make me act crazy or lie or, just do different things and just bring out a side of myself that I did not like and that was not who I was, that was when I realized And it took me a while, but that was my signal of a bad relationship. So, and when I finally got into the relationship with my husband, he brings out the best side in me. He brings out a better side in me. He brings out an Amy that I like and that I love, and he helps me step into my dreams. And so, um, I definitely had, boyfriends that cheated on me and, different experiences like that. And, those were challenging. That was probably some of the most challenging, things that I went through. But I realized that like the right person is going to bring out a beautiful, wonderful side of you. And if the version of you that's coming out, because we all change, we adjust our personalities based on who we're with. And you want to be your best, most authentic self with the person that you love, and the person that's right for you will bring that out in you.
For sure, for sure. Now, like some people, they feel like they've met the person that can bring out the best in them, and like the person that they've been looking for, that they feel really comfortable with. But sometimes that relationship doesn't necessarily work out, and because they felt so safe with this person, they open up so much with this person, even like sexually and everything. There was so much trust in that relationship. They don't know how they're going to give that trust to someone else going forward into another relationship, and they don't know how they can start to express their feminine side again when talking about women. So how can women that have come out of a relationship that they were so engaged in and they felt so safe in start to find themselves again and be able to open up sexually to a new partner?
That's a big question. I feel like when you're coming out of, and I went through this as well, but I feel like when you're coming out of a big relationship and you're just coming out broken and beaten, I'm not talking about abuse here, but you're just coming out and you're feeling like you've lost everything, a major heartbreak. That is a beautiful, I think a lot of people try to jump into something else just to distract themselves. And that's not to say that there's something to that, but I think it's a really beautiful time to turn inward and really look at who you are and what you want and get in touch with yourself at the deepest part. And whether that is exploring a new hobby that you haven't explored before, traveling, looking for a new job, but really taking the opportunity to know who you are, because we can be the best partner and we're going to attract the best people when we are being super true to ourselves. And actually, I had a coaching client that I just worked with very recently, and she was sort of in the same situation. She'd just come out of a long relationship. She was 7 months single. And she was like, I really want to look at these bad patterns that have not been serving me and examine those and figure out how to break them so that if and when she's like, I'm not in a rush to get in a relationship, but I want to know that when I get into that next one, I know what I want. I feel confident being able to vocalize it. And I think that's a huge challenge for a lot of women. Most women don't even know what they want, especially around sex and intimacy, much less being able to say, I would like for you to XYZ, or why don't we try? Because they feel like they're going to be rejected. They feel like they're too much. They feel like they're not worth it. They feel like their partner isn't going to, be into that, or is going to think they're weird, all of these different things. And so I think getting deeply in touch with yourself as a person, yourself as a sexual being, and feeling confident in that is going to make that easier to bring into that next relationship.
Yeah, you touched on something when you mentioned taking time, like because when people rush into something from something, they haven't really had the time to really understand themselves. But some people, when they see the opportunity to take time, they take that opportunity to immerse themselves into their career, for example, to the point that their career becomes their hobby even, and they start even having a lot of success in their career. But sometimes it's to the detriment to their personal life, and they don't really know how to bridge the gap because they focus so heavily on their career and neglect their sexuality so much that they don't know how they're going to bridge that gap again. In your opinion, how can they bridge that gap again once they've neglected their intimate life so much and focus so heavily on their professional life?
Yeah, I think this is a really big challenge. These days, women are CEOs, women are in the C-suite, and especially those women in, excuse me, sorry. And especially women, in those really high level, powerful positions are very much in their masculine energy, in that space. Uh, and so getting back in touch with that feminine side can be a real challenge. I view, when you look at life and you look at the holistic version of it, you have your personal life, you've got your work life, but I view sexuality as part of the whole person, and it's an important part. Um, Taking a step back, it's focusing energy and recognizing that you've got to be able to prioritize yourself.
Right.
And, sometimes it's going to be, I'm going to have to make sure that I go to the gym, because I know a lot of people who, are working a lot. They're working so much, they're not taking care of their bodies. They're eating, bad stuff, all of those things. And then they don't feel very good about themselves. And if you're not feeling very good about yourself on the outside, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to feel confident in the bedroom. And, another really interesting thing to explore, especially for women like these, would be exploring elements of like kink, because really powerful women who are commanding and making decisions all the time and are really in control and in charge. Those women really need to be able to release and surrender into um, be able to surrender into themselves. And so if whether it's with a long-term partner, a husband, a boyfriend, or going into like something like a dungeon, which again, this is a huge jump, but and being able to completely and totally relinquish control is going to be a very, very, very powerful healing modality, especially for women like that.
For sure, for sure, for sure. Now, like different people, once they've like taken that time for themselves, let's say they come out of a relationship that didn't work out, and they took that time to find themselves. Maybe they've been searching different hobbies, and maybe, like you mentioned, they've been getting into different kinks and things like that. Um, Now, like going forward, they're thinking about getting into a relationship again, but they don't necessarily want to go back to how it was previously. Like maybe it was a monogamy, and they're exploring different types of relationships. So they're looking at things like non-monogamy and things like that, and they don't know which direction will be best for them going forward. So in that context, and in the context that like we're all attracted to different people all the time, what is your viewpoint on monogamy versus non-monogamy?
Oh, that's a big question. I, 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 I don't believe that everyone's naturally monogamous. I think that, the world is, our species, humanity is so wide and diverse in so many different ways. And so, monogamy, if you really look at it, it's a societal construct. It was initially designed, I mean, 200, 300, 400 years ago, we needed to be able to raise children, and we needed to be able to, bring in the money and hunt and all of that stuff. And that worked very nicely as a dyad, right? And so that was sort of how our society was built up. But I think that there's a lot of people who aren't naturally monogamous. And what was interesting as I went through my training as a sexologist, I was reading a lot about this. And of course, it made me really look at myself in my own life. And, even have some conversations about my husband, like, would we be interested in like, and we both were like, no, we're not. Like, I think for us, we are naturally monogamous. That is who we are. But it was a choice. I think there's a power in choosing monogamy versus doing it just because it's what we know and what's expected. And then I think there's also a power in saying, you know what, monogamy isn't necessarily for me. And rather than going about it sneakily, infidelity, cheating, all of that stuff, I think so many people think that that's what they have to do. Well, I'm just gonna have to sneak behind, this person's back in order to explore this. And now, if you're already in a monogamous relationship, the other person may very well not be okay with opening it up, and that's also something that's really important. Um, and then you've got to make some decisions there. But I think that when things are done open, honestly, with enthusiastic consent of all parties, then I think there's lots of opportunities to explore all different types of relationships and experiences.
Right, right, right. You mentioned like you communicating about this non-monogamy with your husband, and it seems like you were able to have a discussion, and you both came to the conclusion that you were actually monogamous. Now, like some people, they would like to maybe they're in a monogamous relationship, but they're interested in opening up the relationship, and they'd like to communicate this with their partner. but they're afraid that if they communicate this with their partner, their partner's going to reject the idea and it's going to actually destroy the relationship. In your opinion, how can they start to have this conversation with their partner, or is it something that they should like not speak on if they feel like their partner is not going to be on board with it?
I think that if it's something that is continuously coming up in your mind and in your heart, and then I think it's important to find a way to communicate it. Now, you have to recognize you may be dropping a bomb. You probably are. And so finding an effective way to communicate that is always going to be a challenge. And there's always going to be a lot of fear around that. I always suggest leading with curiosity versus I want this. Um, have you ever considered? And then I think it's also important to look at the reasons behind why you're interested in that, because fantasy and reality are also two very, very different things. I think a lot of people try to explore non-monogamy because maybe, they're not having good sex, their relationship isn't going so well. And so they're thinking, okay, well, I don't really want to have sex with my husband, but he can go have sex with this other person and that'll solve the problem. That is literally the worst possible reason you could ever go into anything. If you're ever going to explore something like non-monogamy, your relationship needs to be rock solid. If there is a crack in it, it's just gonna explode it wide open. So don't ever use that as a solution to fix a relationship. But if you have a really solid relationship, I actually had a client of mine, she and her husband, they were in their mid 50s, their kids were out of the house, and she was very curious about exploring with some female partners. And she's like, our relationship was great. We have a great sex life. We have a great marriage, but, we're empty nesters and life's too short. And this is something that just keeps coming to mind. And so, but, the reality is together they'd watch some porn and it was usually female and female porn. And so it wasn't a huge surprise for him when she said, I'm a little curious to explore this further. What would you think about that? Um, there are some really wonderful books that I recommend. The Ethical Slut is a great one, and it talks about that. And certainly reaching out to a sex and relationship coach, one that specializes in non-monogamy, is a good way to figure out how to approach that conversation. But if it's one of those things where you're like, just, hey, let's do this. I'm going to go this. I want to try this. It's not going to be received well. So leading with curiosity, maybe finding a movie or something like that, oh, have you ever thought about this? Like, this looks kind of interesting. Like, and seeing how they react. And also recognizing that a no right now may not be a no forever. It may, but it's something that sometimes people really need a lot of time to think on and percolate. And so a no may turn into a maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, which could potentially turn into okay, well, we'll check it out another year. So just recognizing that there's an evolution, that potential there.
Right, so just allowing the curiosity to fester and just being patient with it to see where it goes within that dynamic. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So on the flip side of that, like people that are monogamous, they've both chosen monogamy and that's what they want to do. But for some reason, like one partner is always feeling jealous about the other partner. Like maybe they're looking at a picture online or they think that they're speaking to this other person. There's always a reason for jealousy to occur in their mind. And this starts to frustrate the partner that is not doing anything or feels like they're not doing anything and they're just their partner's just continuously jealous. So in this situation, how can the partner that is consistently being accused of things deal with this? And how can the person that is feeling jealous all the time deal with that as
Mhm.
well?
Whew, that's a hard one. Um, I mean, jealousy stems from insecurity. I mean, at its core, that's what it comes from. And so the person who's feeling jealous all the time, that's the person that really has got to do the work. That person needs to look in and figure out why they are feeling that way. Like, what is it about them? Are they not feeling fair enough? Do they have things from their past? Do they have models? Did their dad constantly cheat, or did their mom constantly cheat on their dad? Where did those messages come from? And that person really needs to be willing to work on themselves. And that's hard because jealousy can also be tied up with ego. Um, so, if this is a consistent problem in the relationship, um, again, I think that the jealous partner is the one that really needs to look and figure out the source of their jealousy and see if there's anything that, and then really start to look at reality. Like, okay, this is what I'm thinking, and then this is reality. But the more that they have that jealous behavior towards the partner, if their partner really isn't doing anything, that partner is going to be pushed further and further away. And eventually, the jealous partners could create a self-fulfilling prophecy because if someone's constantly being accused of doing something they're not doing, they might be like, well, I mean, I don't know, might as well go ahead, and he already thinks I'm cheating anyway. So, and that's an extreme version of it. So, as far as what the other partner can do is obviously reassure their partner that they're not doing anything. I know that if I was the partner that wasn't doing anything, that would be very, like, if that continued, that would be a deal breaker for me. I don't know that I could stay in a relationship like that, frankly.
Right. Well, speaking about like you mentioned earlier that like if they feel like their partner is doing something and they're not doing nothing, they're gonna continuously the partner's gonna be pushed away but by doing that to them all the time. But sometimes there's actually some truth to that. Like maybe the partner has felt pushed away, but sometimes they've actually stepped out of the relationship and infidelity has happened. But often they haven't spoken about what has happened to their partner. So it's like they're carrying around they're carrying around this sense of guilt and shame about what has happened, and they want to communicate this with their partner. But once again, they're afraid of breaking up the relationship if they do. So in this situation, like how can they communicate what they have done by stepping out of the relationship with their partner, and how can their partner who receives this information deal with this situation that they obviously it's a shock to their system, but how can they start to deal with this situation?
Sure. You know, Infidelity is one of the biggest challenges that a relationship can go through. But I think that good, strong, healthy relationships are always, always, always going to be built on a foundation of trust. And so if somebody has broken the trust, then it is important for them to come clean. There's a concept that I learned from another sex coach, Maya Rose, and she talked about radical honesty. And she talked about how it's really important for two partners to share like the last thing you would ever want to tell your partner, you need to tell your partner those things. All of the little dark corners, all of the little skeletons, sharing those with your partner from a place of love, and with that partner being able to receive from a place of love. Now, in the instance of infidelity, this is going to be really, really difficult. But the best thing to do, I mean, you just got to kind of rip off the Band-Aid and share it, recognizing that then at that point, there's some choices to be made, right? So if you share this with your partner, now that partner needs to decide, yes, I want to stay in this relationship and try to work it out, or no, I don't. And both partners need to decide that. But both partners, if they do want to repair the relationship, they both have to choose that and choose the repair route. And then both of them need to be willing to do the work to come together. And is the relationship ever going to be the same? No. Can they come out of it potentially stronger? Absolutely. If they're willing to love each other and support each other and do everything that it takes to prove trust and love and caring. And relationships are work. I mean, every single day you make choices, tiny little choices to really big choices to invest in your relationship. And that's what makes them go the distance. And so certainly in that situation, I mean, I believe in honesty, and I don't think that you can have a long-term relationship with that level of trust and guilt.
Yeah, for sure. Like honesty is always the best thing going forward, because the longer you keep a secret, like the worse it's going to be if it was ever to come out, and it will be almost impossible to build any kind of trust going forward, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Yeah. So moving on from that, like when we look at like brand new relationships now, when people get into a brand new relationship, there's a lot of butterflies, there's a lot of chemistry that they're feeling in their body, and they really want to immerse themselves in this brand new relationship. But some people, upon doing that, they start to lose their sense of self, like we were talking about earlier. So how can people immerse themselves in a brand new relationship without necessarily losing their sense of self in that process?
Ooh, you have some good questions. That falling in love period, it's this beautiful, unique cocktail of chemicals going through your brain and body that only happens at the beginning of a new relationship. It can never be replicated ever again. It's never going to happen in that same relationship. And so just that flush of just oxytocin and serotonin and all of those love like bonding chemicals are just really, really powerful and fun. And I say enjoy that wave because if you're stay with that person for the rest of your life, you're never going to get to ride that wave again. Um, Losing your sense of self, I think that when you're entering into a new relationship, there's always going to be a shifting of self, because you are adapting to that person, they're adapting to you. And so there's going to be some shifting and adapting that happens there. But knowing what your core values are, those should never change. And when you're younger, if you're, in your teens or 20s or maybe even early 30s, you may not really know what your core values are yet because you're still figuring that stuff out for yourself. And that's why I said, if you're in that in between stage between relationships, that's such a beautiful time. Like, what is truly important to you? What are the things that are absolute non-negotiables? And if you've taken that time to reflect and define those, then when you get into that relationship and when you're in that like starry-eyed love phase, um, and then when you come out of it, because a couple months later you kind of come out of it, and then you're going to look and then you kind of settle in and you'll be able to see, am I still aligning with what's really, really important to me? And if you aren't, well, then guess what? You get to fall in love again. Yay. So, and if you are, then that's certainly somebody that you want to continue to explore and grow with. And, like I said in the very beginning, someone who's bringing out the best in you. Because if you're with somebody that isn't aligning with your core values, then they're probably not going to be bringing out the best in you.
Right. Yeah. So, you yourself, like as a sexologist, like I'm working with people with intimacy and things like that. Like you speak to a lot of people all the time, and you see different things that like trigger like different like anxiety within them based on like the issues that they have to do with their intimacy. What would you say were the common things that you've come across that cause anxiety with people and their intimacy from your experience?
I mean, the biggest thing that I hear probably is I'm stuck in my head. So women, we have so many things going on. We're worried about the kids, the job, the house, all of that stuff. So all of those things trigger anxiety. And then, we're trying to enjoy things with our husband or partner. Or maybe a lot of women aren't even trying to enjoy it. They're just kind of like trying to get through it. And that triggers anxiety. What's wrong with me? Why am I broken? Why is it taking me so long? Why does he always why is he always touching me? Why don't I want to be touched? It's just this horrible spiral that so many women get into of questioning themselves and questioning their bodies and feeling like they're broken. And I think there are so many women out there that feel like their bodies are broken. They're broken. And it's not the woman that's broken. It's the sex is broken. The way that we've been taught to have sex is broken. Um, because we've been taught to have sex in a way that is best and most efficient for the man, for the guy. Which is intercourse, right? So, and there's so many women who are like, another anxiety, why can't I orgasm during intercourse? What's wrong with me? All these other women can orgasm during intercourse. Well, that's not actually true. Less than 8% of women um, can experience orgasm on intercourse alone. But men are taught to have sex this way, women are expected to have sex this way, and they come together and it's just not working. And so that's where all this anxiety is coming up. And then relationships are getting fractured. I have so many clients who are like, we're great. Our relationship is great. We're wonderful parents. We work beautifully as a team, but this is the only thing that is challenging us. And this is a constant issue in our marriage. And we don't want to do this, we don't want to do this anymore. We want to solve this because then I know that our marriage is going to be so much stronger if we can just solve this thing.
Right, right. So, what would you say some of the solutions are to those issues? Like, you said like men are taught to have sex a certain way, women think that that's how they should do it. Like, so what like are some of the solutions in your opinion to solve that?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I work on with my clients, and it's deep and it goes in lots of different directions. But I think, the first there's an educational piece to it. I think probably one of the biggest things that I like to teach and explain is the difference between orgasm focused sex and pleasure focused sex. So, and we've been taught to have orgasm focused sex. So, men, yeah, I've got three boys at home. So, men, when they're boys, you guys learn around puberty, you're like, oh, if I touch this, it feels good. Ooh, I get to have an orgasm, right? And so you learn very early on to have this orgasm focused, sex with yourself. And you're like, this feels really good. Now you get with a partner. Well, I want to give her an orgasm too. So you're trying really hard to give her an orgasm, which is great. But our orgasms work very differently than your orgasms. They take much more time. Porn, movies, all of this stuff makes it look like women are having orgasms in 2 or 3 minutes, which is absolutely not realistic. It takes most women 20 to 40 minutes to get fully aroused. 20 to 40 minutes to get fully aroused. And I have so many clients who are like, I can't have an orgasm in 5 minutes. And so I just get bored and I just say, whatever, honey, like you get yours, it's not going to happen for me. It probably would have happened for her if she had allowed herself and allowed her partner, and if her partner was willing to invest that 20 to 40 minutes of time to get her body into the full state of arousal. That's probably the biggest thing, is allowing 20 to 40 minutes. But in that 20 to 40 minutes, we're sitting there in our heads worrying, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't this feel good? Like sometimes the first 10 minutes for a lot of women, especially perimenopausal and postmenopausal, can be uncomfortable, irritating, possibly mildly painful. If there's more pain, that's a different story. But in that first 10 minutes, if you're like, I don't know, like he's working really hard down there, but I'm kind of bored and going through my checklist in my head and 10 minutes can feel like a really long time, much less 20 or 40. And so I think that's one of the first things that I teach, and that illuminating for both men and women.
Yeah, yeah. I would definitely say like foreplay is like 90% of intercourse in different forms, and a lot of people can overlook that. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't call it foreplay. I call it core play because foreplay sounds optional. It's not optional.
For
It's
sure.
foreplay is core play is the main event for us. So, and I think there are so many guys who believe that they need to be able to have intercourse. Like they're like, I want to last longer. Like, no, you don't. Like, if you last 5 minutes, if you've done 30 minutes of core play and last 5 minutes, like, good, we're good. Like that 30 minutes of foreplay, that's our main event. The intercourse at the end is like icing on top for you, and that's the main event for you. So, and that's just changing the way that we view sex, because we also view sex as intercourse, and sex is all of the pleasurable activities. That's how I define sex, is all of the different pleasurable activities, manual, oral, anal, everything touching our skin. There's so much play in that. And so when you're talking about a sexual experience that lasts an hour, that might only be 5 minutes of intercourse and 55 minutes of everything else, which
Excellent, excellent.
sounds way more fun than an hour of intercourse to me.
Excellent, excellent. Amy, thank you for everything that you've shared. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you, find out more about you, and find out more about what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you. The best way to connect with me is come listen to my podcast. It's called the Sensational Sex Podcast. Partner with another sexologist, Dr. Trina Reed, and we help women in long-term relationships thrive after the honeymoon stage is over. Every single episode we break down a common issue that women in long-term relationships are experiencing. We give you 3 or 4 little micro tips that you can apply into your bedroom tonight and watch your sex life transform. Additionally, if you're interested in one-to-one coaching or learning or working with me, you can come to my website, suburbanintimacy.com. You can find me online on all of the socials as Amy Rowan Intimacy Coach.
Excellent. And for the viewers, all of that information will be in the description, so you can get in touch with Amy and find out more about what she does. Once again, thank you so much for coming on, Amy. Any final words before we wrap up?
I just want women to know that you are not broken and that you are capable of immense amounts of pleasure and you are absolutely worth all the time that it takes. Thank you
Excellent.
so much, Kayo, for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed this talk.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Amy.